Mm. Okay, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Halisna Muhammad Khairi and my group members, which are Shahi Akil, Umi Sofia, and also Mama Aikal. We will be presenting the language in use. So let's proceed to the introduction. So language is not an abstract construction of the learned or dictionary makers, but it is something arising out of work, needs, ties, joys, affection, tastes of long generations of humanity, and has its basis and low close to the ground, which means that the language in use is actually a language that we use in different type of group. So let's see the contents that we will be learning. So the first content is style. I proceed with slang, jargon and argot, taboo or not taboo, racial and national epithets, language and sexism, and the last content is secret languages and language games. And we'll proceed to the last part, which is the summary. So next, for the first content that I will be presenting is style. So it's actually a situation dialects that speakers speak differently based on their situation. As an example, the way a speaker speaks with friends, another way on a job interview or presenting in class. Another way they talk is talking to small children, like kids, and the last one is talking to parents and so on. So there are a lot of different situations as we can see there. So the style actually in language we have two style. The first one is informal. So the rules of construction are used more often. The synthetic rules of negation and agreement may be altered, and many words are used that do not occur in the formal style. And it is also a rule governed. As we know, we don't use the formal words uh in informal way. As we are speaking to our friends, we won't use the formal words. So, for example, with family, we will be asking just like eating breakfast, and with friends, we will be just asking them eating. But with our boss, we would say, "Are you having your breakfast?" in a polite way. So that is the differences. For the next one, the we would see the formal style. So the formal style is actually a language that sounds more polite and professional. It usually used with strangers, business partner, and so on. Some of the words used were not used in informal style, as the same thing with the informal style. As an example, the formal words that we would use is astounding. We don't actually say the word astounding when we are talking to our friends, bewildering, or prominent. It is rarely to be spoken when we are speaking with our friends or talking with our friends. So it is also a rule governed. And for example, with partner, we would say, "Do you know where's the nearby restroom?" With our lecturer, we would say, "Excuse me, do you know the nearest restroom?" Or with a doctor, we would say, "Pardon me, is there a restroom nearby?" So there are differences between the first example and also the second and the third example. Okay, so we will be passing the slide to the next presenter.
Hi and Assalamualaikum to our lecturer, Sir Ariff, and my fellow friends. Today I'm going to be explaining and presenting about slang in Introduction to Language. So, slang can be defined as the informal language that is used in everyday interactions. Also, it is something that nearly everyone use and recognize, but nobody can define it precisely. Slang is a metaphorical, playful, elliptical, vivid, and shorter lived than ordinary language. Also, the use of slang has introduced many new words into the language by combining old words into new meanings. I'm going to give you guys example of slang. Let's focus on general teen slang, which is cheddar. Cheddar, we all know it's money. Goat stands for greatest of all time. Gucci is good or cool. Lead is amazing. Sick is when you say something is cool. Snatch, it looks good. TBH stands for to be honest. Thirsty is trying to get attention. V is very last is YOLO. you only live once. So all these slangs, these examples has been used for so many years now. Everyone use it in our daily basis. Doesn't mean you are young or you are in your middle age. Everyone has been using this. So I wanted you guys to know that this is what we call slang. Next, I'm going to move on to our next slide, which is racial and national epithets. So, racial and national epithets. An epithet is a term used to characterize a person or thing. So, the use of epithets for people of different religions, nationalities, or races tell us something about the speakers. Uh, Also, when we talk about epithet, a racial epithet is a term used to characterize people on the basis of their race. Alright. So the epithets also used by a majority to demean a minority that may be claimed as terms of bonding and friendship among members of the minority. Basically, epithet is a when you characterize a person or thing based on their race. When we talk about the racial and national epithets, we're gonna focus epithets based on racial and based on race basis. Okay, so I'm going to give the example. The example are words such as kike for Jew, wop for Italian. Wop is actually a slur for Italian. Nigger or coon for African American, and then slan for Asian, towhead for and towhead for Middle Eastern Arab. All these examples reflect racist and chauvinist views of society. So these are not good for us. Even words that sounds like epithets are perhaps to be avoided. Once happened back then, an administrator in Washington D.C. described a fund he administers as Nick Cutley, meaning stingy. He resigned his position under fire for using a word so close to a degrading word, which is the Nick Cutley, because Nick means nigger. That can in I mean when someone is not African American say that, it will insult the people who are born with that race. Alright. So language, however, is creative, malleable, and ever changing. The epithets used by a majority, you know, they can reclaim as terms of bonding and friendship among members of the minority. Thus, for some, we emphasize African Americans, the word nigger is used to show affection. Similarly, the ordinarily degrading word queer is used among some gay people as a term of endearment, as is cripple or creep among some individuals who share a disability. So epithets is is an insult and a slur for some races, and we cannot just say it for our benefits. We cannot just say it to insult other people. So it's not good. I hope you guys understand what is slang and national epithets. So we're going to move on to the next slide that I'm going to explain, which is marked and unmarked forms. So
Alright, moving on to jargon and argot, which is one of the language in use, the terms of language in use. Alright, so basically there are four elements that you need to understand about jargon. So, jargon can be defined as the language, especially the vocabulary, peculiar to a particular trait, profession, or group, which is medical jargon, for example. And then unintelligible or meaningless talk or writing that we used to call it as a gibberish. And then any talk or writing that one does not understand. And then language that is characterized by uncommon or pretentious vocabulary and convoluted syntax, and is often vague in meaning. So there are four elements in total. Alright, moving on to the next one. And then jargon can be called as a trade language, because it would refer to the people who spoke different native language uh, to communicate. Like they come up with their own methods, which is from the original words. They turn out to be they turn the words itself to their own native language, and then covers the language. Covers the language here is used for in a particular area or who by people who have a common interest. A particular area here means like just like a native language just now, a native speaker, but this kind of particular area that I would say is about professions, just like a medical jargon itself. And then much like slang, it is because jargon and slang are really tallied and it can develop as a kind of shorthand to express an ideas, and they are frequently discussed between members a group. It shows that what we call it jargon and slang are not much far because they used to come from the original words and create and evaluate to something that would be understood by a certain group. And standard terms here may be given a more precise or unique for among practitioners of a field. So as you can see upper on the right, there's an example that I put there, which is a computer terms. It's very familiar with us. Like we used to know it since primary school or back then when it was in school. So the terms was modem, RAM. It's actually RAM, CPU, and DVD. So these types of terms are called jargon of computer because it is actually a short form of the real long words that provided. And then it's very easy to say, it's very easy to pronounce, and it looks like more simple. All right. So these are the examples of jargon that provided in the professions. So we have examples of medical jargon, we have example of business jargon, and also political jargon, while followed by internet jargon. So internet jargon, one of the most useful things that we always use as a daily basis when we texting to our friends, having a conversation in WhatsApp or whatsoever, like BTW is stand for by the way, and OTW stand for on the way. All right. Moving on to the argot, one of the part that can't be separated from jargon. So argot, basically, the term was borrowed from French, and it first appeared in print in the early 17th century when it was used as the label for the secret language of beggars and street merchants. So basically, these types of group back then in the 17th century, but now argot is still defined as a secret language. And it's also words and expressions which are used by small groups of people and which are not easily understood by other people. Example of a small group, just like a schoolmates, outlaws, colleagues, and many other groups. So an argot is a secret language that used by these types of group. It is because to prevent outsiders from understanding the conversation. Like the term's secret language here was created to show that their conversation is only understand by them. For example, in our country, if you have heard about F language, that's what we call a secret language. It is from an original words, and it transformed using F language that they replace the vocabulary and idioms. All right. Moving on to the taboo and or not taboo. So basically, the word taboo itself is borrowed from Tongan, and then it means forbidden. Certain words are considered taboo in some society, and they are not used in polite company. If you see the words not used in polite company, it means that taboo have given a negative vibe itself, and in fact, it is forbidden to say, to at least speak about that. So taboo, a culture or religious custom that does not allow people to do, like use or talk about a particular things, because people find it's something that offensive, embarrassing, inappropriate, informal. All right. So Forbidden acts or words reflect the particular customs and view of the society. So in certain societies, words that have religious connotations are considered profane if used outside of formal religious ceremonies. In this case, we call it as informal, inappropriate, because bad language in English can be divided into three broad categories. So the first one is religious words. Like many people consider these words to represent holy or sacred subjects, and so they are offended when the words are used out of context or in a disrespectful way. All right. So the second category of taboo is words concerns the functions of the body, like especially lavatorial words connected with things produced by the body. Like people generally do not like to speak openly about toilet functions, like human dignity and so on. But these types of taboo is like swear or maybe like using a language or body language. And the third category of swear words tends to contain the strongest words in language. These words are all related to sexual act and also sex organs that will be shown by me later. So most of them are punchy in style, like often only one syllable long, and are intended to shock or offend in a most specifically empathic way. All right. So these are the examples of taboo that we are taught not to mention certain words, like examples that you can read here, like how the process it is. Right one shows that taboo in America but not in England, like they address woman as a lady, like the words bloody was not printed as a full words in a newspaper because it's very inappropriate. And then moving on to the sex and taboo words that I've mentioned before for the third categories of taboo. But before that, what is not taboo? So basically, not taboo, really universal. It's very universal. It was sensitive issues, but back then because it shows like a pregnancy issues, mental health, AIDS, and something that really give you a negative vibe. But nowadays, it has been worldwide and make people open their mind to accept the real world and the problems that some people are having and everything. So it's just like a motivations and educations for us to look up and not being offensive. So moving on to the sex and taboo words again. Words relating to sex organ make up a set of taboo words of many cultures. Some languages have no native words to mean sexual intercourse, and then but have to borrow from neighboring, which is from other country. So in this case, two or more words or expressions can have the same linguistic meaning, with one acceptable and the others embarrassing, which means require one words of positive and one words of negative. All right. For examples, here you can see there are two different opinions and perceptions, with which is in English, words borrowed from Latin sound scientific and therefore appear to be technical and clean, whereas native Anglo-Saxons counterparts are taboo. So we know that Latins basically from French or Latin itself, and Anglo-Saxons is from Germany. So if we want to compare for those two perceptions, Latin is more abstract and it's more, what I can say is not is a complicated word, but Anglo-Saxons give you a shortens an easy words to understand, more quickly to read. It's very simple. So these are the examples of comparison Anglo-Saxon taboo words and Latin acceptable words for sex organs. All right. So the word cunt in Latin acceptable words is called vagina. And then for cock, it's a penis. And prick also is a penis. Tits is a mammary gland. Shit is a faces. So you know how to compare between what is Latin perceptions and what is Anglo-Saxon's words. It's very common way to see that those things have like a complicated and also an easy way to read and understand what it is. All right, so the next one is euphemism, which is one of the subtopic under taboo or not taboo. But before that, I would say that for sex and taboo word, these facts actually reflects that the vocabulary used by the upper class was superior to that used by the lower class. Like the use of words and so on. So there is no grammatical reason why the word vagina is clean, whereas cunt is dirty, but sociolinguistic reasons because it shows the inappropriate things like informal, like in a polite way. So there's always comes with sociolinguistic reasons. And then for euphemisms, so the existence of taboo words motivates the creations of euphemisms. And euphemism is a word or phrase that replaces a taboo word to avoid unpleasant subject. So it means like euphemisms is something that we can call as a neutralize to neutralize a sentence or probably neutralize a word itself from taboo. Alright, as for example, I'll show you less acceptable words and more acceptable words. So less acceptable words is common words that we know, but more acceptable words is a neutralize of this word. So die, we use pass on or pass away is more in a polite way. It's very formal. It's very nice to say it. Urinate, we can call it as a water the horse, squeeze the lemon. For the have intercourse, play cards, and garages, hide the sausages. Alright, so this euphemism shows that a word has not only in linguistic denotative meaning, but also connotative meaning. So what is denotative meaning? Denotative meaning here is straight to the point. When it comes to color, for example, like you said, word red is just a color, so it means like red. It's not something that you can express. But when it comes to connotative meaning, connotative is something that expresses an idea, qualities, or feelings. So red, in a connotative way, it describes anger, like danger, like something that really have connections with those color. So you know how to differentiate between denotative and connotative. So I think that's all. Thank you.
So, Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. My name is Umi Safra binti Abu and I will continue today's presentation. So, the topic that I will talk about is language and sexism. Okay, so language and sexism is usually described as something that implies one sex is superior to the other sex. So, sexism is a term used to refer to the idea of male superiority by referring to female as inferior to males intellectually and psychologically. More precisely, sexist in language is a language that expresses bias in favor of one sex and treats the other sex in a discriminatory manner. In much cases, the bias in favor of men and against women. So, as for the examples here, like the examples I have prepared, here we have one-man show, manpower, manhood, man-made, chairman, fireman, policeman, and salesman. So instead of using these words that only focus on the word man, that only focus on one gender, we can actually use gender-neutral inclusive language. So by using gender-neutral inclusive language, it will be fair to both genders, as we are not focused on one gender only. So instead of using one-man show, we can actually use solo performance. Instead of using manpower, we can use workers or workforce. Instead of manhood, we can use adulthood or maturity. So for the word man-made, we can use the word handmade. For the word chairman, we can use chairperson. For the word fireman, we can use firefighter instead. And instead of using policeman, we can use police officer. And for the last one, we can use salesperson instead of salesman. So that's all from me. I will pass it to the next presenter.
Mark and unmarked forms. The male form is unmarked, the more generally used term, and the female form is marked, often created by adding a bound morpheme or making a compound. So, and then English speakers are often taught to choose he as the unmarked pronoun and to choose she only when the referent is especially female. They tend to think of the male sex as predominant. Example. So the example given here is male heir, and then female heiress, male major, female majorette, male hero, female heroine, male wolf, female she wolf, cop, lady cop. So that's all from me for this presentation. I hope you guys understand, and anything you guys can ask me. Thank you so much for today.
The last content for language in use is secret languages and language games. We use this special language as a means of identifying with their groups or to prevent outsiders from knowing what is being said. This happened in Nushu. The women secretly uh, make a secret writing of Chinese, which originated in the 3rd century as a means for a woman to communicate with one another. As you can see in the slide, we have the picture of the example. You can see the differences between the Nushu text and the Chinese transliteration. Okay, so for more other examples of the secret language and language games, the first one is American slaves developed an elaborate code that could be understood by slave owners. So the slave codes were laws relating to slavery and enslaved people, specifically regarding the Atlantic slave trade and chattel slavery in the Americas. So the next one is Pig Latin. So, Pig Latin is actually a secret language formed from English by transferring the initial consonant or consonant cluster of each word to the end of the word and adding a vocalic syllable, usually a. As an example, so for Pig Latin, it would be Ikpe Etinle. The next one is the Walberry. All nouns, verbs, pronouns, and adjectives are replaced by semantically contrastive words. Alright, so for the example, we'd say a dark blue. In the Walberry, we would say a light red. So it's the contrastive words. And the next one is Brazil. It substitutes an E for all of the vowels. So I could give you another example which we could actually relate. We use this language during our childhood. So it's we call it G language or F language or M language. It's actually used the same way of speaking. We just change the letter. We actually put the letter, as an example, the letter F after the vowel sound. As an example, for sugar, we would say shufu gefe. And for M word, it would be, for M language, it would be shumu gema for sugar. For the G language, it would be shugu gege. So, we used to speak this language to our friends just to make sure that the other one would not understand what we are talking about.
So, in conclusion, everyone has a unique way of communicating. Some may use different styles or registers depending on the context. And not to forget that culture influences language, and language may have an influence on the culture in which it is spoken. So that's all from us. Thank you.